If you plan to build a project with Bubble, repeating groups are for sure going to be required at some point to create cards, lists, and display various types of information. So knowing how to use repeating groups is an essential skill you need to master if you want to build projects with no code. In this video, I'm going to show you what repeating groups are and how to use them to create amazing projects with Bubble and no code. Let's go. Hi. I'm Caio Calderari from AutomationHelpers.com. We help companies like yours get automated and grow by using industry-leading tools to build portals, apps, integrations, and much more. Subscribe to the channel if you want to leverage tech to help your business grow. Alright, let's jump straight into Bubble and start this amazing tutorial. Okay guys, so today we are going to talk about repeating groups. First, I'm going to show you where they are inside your Bubble editor. Okay, so I'm here inside an empty project that I just created inside Bubble. There is basically nothing here. And on the design tab, I can see some visual elements available for me. These elements are the elements that I can use to build my pages in a visual way. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we are going to see some containers here. And we have this component called repeating group. And then you can ask, Caio, what is a repeating group? Well, basically a repeating group is a group, which is this component here, but that repeats. Basically, that's it. The idea here is that you have one group, one component that you're going to design, and the other components will repeat this first component. But you can add data to these components and you can manage how they will look, and you can display different information for each individual item on this repeating list, and then use the same design across all the components and use the same design as the source for this component list, but show different data on each specific item. It's gonna be way simpler to understand when I actually show you how it works. But before we actually use the repeating group, I want to show you some real-life examples of how people are using it in different types of projects, so you can kind of picture how they can be applied in real-life scenarios, okay? The first example is a very simple one. We are here on a landing page and we have a couple components here. So this list of logos here could be a repeating group, or it could be static as well. Depends on how you configure it. If we scroll down a little bit more, we can also see some other components. For instance, this top templates list is an actual repeating group that you can scroll and see more information as you move the scroll bar. So this is an example of a repeating group. We have an image here, a text field here, and another text field here. And all the items follow the same design style and the same structure, but they are pulling different information from a database showing one specific template for each individual item. And behind it, we have a repeating group doing the work. On another project here, we have other examples. If we scroll down here on this page, we have a list of beverages. And this is also a repeating group pulling information from the database to display each individual item here on this list. Again, here we have another repeating group, here another one. Each individual group is repeating the information from the first one and displaying different data for different categories here based on the information that comes from the database. Here on this other example, we have a lot of products, and all of these products are coming from a database. And we have the repeating groups display information about each individual product, as we can see here on this page. Another example is this kind of dashboard project where we have a list with a lot of geos, and this list is also a repeating group, as this other list is also another repeating groups. All right, now I think you got the idea. Repeating groups are very versatile and flexible and customizable, so you can use it to bring information from your database and display it on a list. It could be a horizontal or vertical list. And the design will vary depending on how you want to build it and how you design your layout. So you can build pretty much anything. Now we are going to dive into this repeating group component, and I'm going to show you how you can use it and the main settings that you can change to tweak it and use it in different scenarios. Once you understand the basics, I'm sure you'll be able to play with it and add the repeating groups into multiple different scenarios and use cases. I'm gonna go again inside Bubble right now, and we are gonna add a new repeating group on this index page. Right now, my index page layout is set to fixed, so I can play around with the repeating group and move it where I want. But have in mind that when building an actual project, you are gonna wanna select either row or column if you're building a page layout, because these are the most common use cases for building responsive designs. Now, if you don't know anything at all about responsive design and you want to learn a little bit more about it, I recorded a full tutorial here on the channel, so make sure to watch this video next so you can learn a little bit more about responsive design as well. Okay, so I'm gonna click here on the repeating group and I'm gonna draw a repeating group on my page. Once I add the repeating group to my page, it will look like this by default. But of course, we can customize this to look specifically how we want it to look and behave. Right now, as we can see, if we go to the Appearance tab, as we can see, it's asking us to configure the type of content, meaning the database we wanna collect information from. Right now, I don't have any database, and if you're following this tutorial, you also don't have any database. So for now, we are going to select text, and then we are going to define a data source later. As we can see right away, we have a couple information here that is configured by default, and we can change this. So we have a set fixed number of rows, which is selected, and we have 4 rows being displayed. If we want to reduce the amount of rows we want to display on our repeating group, we can click here and we can change this number. Now, if we want to make sure we are only selecting a few items from our database and showing, let's say, 10 items on a page, then we can use this option. But if we want to make sure the list continues to add new items as we scroll on the page, then we can click here to remove this option, and we are not going to define a specific number of items we want to show on the repeating group. Based on what you want to achieve, you should select or deselect this option. Once we deselect this fixed number of rows option, we will see a new option showing up, which is the minimum height of row. And right now, this is defined as 56 pixels. If we want to make this a little bit bigger, we can add more pixels to it. So let's say it's 200, then it's gonna grow. If I add, let's say 100, then it's gonna always consider the size of the entire component that I added to my page and try to divide this by the number that I place here, okay? As much as possible. Of course, this component is not going to be exactly like this. It's not going to be fixed on the page like I'm doing right now. I'm going to make it become responsive. So you just have to consider, do I want to show a specific number of items on this repeating group? For instance, if I'm building a product list, how many products do I want to show on that specific page? 5, 10. If it's a fixed number, then you should check this option here and define the number of rows or columns that you want to display. But if you want to create a list and people are going to be scrolling on that page and they want to see more items as they scroll, then you shouldn't define how many items are going to be displayed. There is another thing that can limit the amount of items you want to display, which is the data source as well. Now, once you do a search for or you create your query, you can also define the amount of items that will be displayed, okay? By the way, if you need help building a project or if you have any questions, we are here to assist. Visit our website at automationhelpers.com. We are offering free 30-minute consultation calls with our experts. I'm sure they will be able to help you get your project done. Visit the link down below and book your call today. You can always define the rows and columns, and these options are similar. So you have the set fixed number of rows and also the set fixed number of columns as well. So if you want to create a list, then you will have only one column, right? Because it will work like this. You have one column, it's fixed, and then you have 5 rows. That's exactly what's going on here. Now, if you want to do the opposite, then you should select 1 row and then 5 columns, for instance, or 3 columns, as many as you want. And then your repeating group will change from a list to columns, basically from vertical to horizontal. You also have other options here. For instance, you have separators. As we can see, there are little lines here between each item. This is where you control it. So if I change the color here, for instance, and make it red, if I increase the separator width, you're going to see it better. So this is where you change this style. Basically, when I use it, I don't use separators, but you can use it if you want to, of course, but I usually check them as none. So then I design the things that I want to design here, and then I add this little separation on the actual item that I will design here inside the repeating group itself, okay? Now I'm going to just bring it back so we can visualize it for now. And now we also have some other options here as like background style, the border style. The border style is the border that is on the component itself. That's another thing that I also remove because I don't want them to show up. There is this layout tab as well that you can use. Right now it's defined as column, and we have a few alignment options here. And we also have margins as well, the component size. We are going to start by creating a basic design here on the first cell so you can understand the repeating part of repeating groups, okay? So I'm going to grab a group here and I'm going to draw a group inside this first container here, okay? Now, notice that I cannot draw inside the other slots here. I can only draw on the first one. And once I start drawing things here, it will clone the components that I draw here on the other ones. Of course, right now it's not showing anything because it's just a little group that I've added here. But once I start adding other components here, it will make more sense. Now, I have to make sure that I understand this relationship between parent and child components, okay? Because the repeating group itself is now the parent of this group that is going to live inside this cell here. And also, whatever is inside this group here, it will be the child of this group A that I just created, and the group A will be its parents, okay? So it's always this relationship. The bigger component encapsulating the other components is the parent, and then the child, and the parent, child, until the last component, okay? All right, so we have a group here. I'm going to rename this group, and then I'm going to select a couple options here. Right now, it's a minimum width of 40 pixels. I'm going to make it 0. We have an option here that is saying fit width to content. I'm going to uncheck this, and then it's going to grow. And then we have a minimum height here, which I'm going to remove later, but I'm going to keep right now because I want to be able to visualize this component as a whole. So I'm going to make it 150 pixels. Now, notice this. I'm going to start adding some other little components inside this group here. And I'm also going to increase this sidebar here so you can follow along. Right now we have the repeating group text, which could be just repeating group for now. And we have card container, which is this group that I added here. Now I'm gonna bring a text component inside this card container group. I'm gonna call it group as well so we can remember it's a group, okay? Now, once I've added this text on this group, I'm going to change the style here, select heading 4, and I'm gonna type in example. See now that I have the same text applied here on the other cells as well. That's because it's a repeating group, so it's repeating the content from this cell. Of course, when I configure a database source here and define the query that's gonna pull information from my database, I can also add dynamic data to this text field, and each individual item here is going to be one item from our database, and it will show different titles for each individual text field. If we have images, the same will happen, and every component we add here can be customized based on the data we have. All right, so let's add a button here now, and I'm gonna call this button view more. I'm gonna add a couple design things here. I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna detach the standard group style, and it's gonna expose a couple extra options. I'm gonna add a background that is going to be white, and here I'm gonna select a border radius of 5, and I'm gonna add a outset shadow. I'm gonna make this 0, 0. The blur radius will be 10, and here I'm going to make this a little bit more subtle. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is to add some margins to my layout here, and I'm gonna add, let's say, 10 pixels bottom, left, and right, so it's a little bit distant from each other. As we can see, the components are aligned at the top. I can make them aligned at the center, and then here, if I click on the text element itself, I can see I have some options here, like the horizontal alignment, if I want to make it go to the center, or to the right, or to the left, or I can also define that it will stretch and fit the entire component size, okay? Now the mean width is 0, the mean height is 0. It's saying fit height to content, which is okay in this case. We also have a button here. We can do the same, define how the button will behave. We can define mean width, mean height as well. For now, it's okay. I'm not gonna change these settings. We can change padding, margin as well. I can also change the container alignment. In this case, I can move everything to the bottom, to the top, to the center, or make them space around or space between, okay, depending on what style I'm looking to achieve. Now I'm gonna align these components with this option here, space between. And then since they are going to be so close to the edges here, I'm going to add some internal padding on the group here. Okay, so I'm going to add a padding of 10 as well. And then this way they will have some margin around the card itself. Hey, are you enjoying this content so far? If so, click the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep learning more about tech and automation. Thank you. All right, it's starting to take shape, which is really nice. Now, we have one item here that is displaying information. There is a button here, and the other items here are replicating this same style. Now, if you say, Kyle, I liked this option, but I actually want to build a list. How do I do that? It's very simple. You just click here on the repeating group itself, and we are going to change these settings here. We are going to say instead of columns being 3, we are going to say it's just one column. And then on the rows, we are going to select how many items we want to show on this list. So for instance, if I pick 4 items, it will show a list of items here instead. Now, before we continue the tutorial, let's talk about the layout. I'm going to select the index page and I'm going to change it to column, okay? And now I want the repeating group to stretch throughout the entire page. First, I'm going to center align this. And here I have an option that is checked, which is make this element a fixed width, which I don't want. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck this option. And here I have another option that I have to uncheck, which is this fit width to content. Okay, so once I uncheck this, it will make my entire repeating group grow. Now, the height also could be fit height to content or no, depending on what you want to build in terms of your page layout. And depending on how you set up the repeating group, you have to change the group that is inside it as well. Okay, so you are always going to keep changing the layout features here, and then you change also the group or the components that are inside it. For instance, right now, we can notice a little gap here. It's because our card container is 150 pixels and it has this option checked. If I uncheck this, then it will grow. You gotta make sure you understand this parent and child relationship, okay? Now, let's say if I changed this item here and I want this button to go to the left, I can come to the button and then change it to go to the left. All right, guys, now let's continue the tutorial. But before we dive deeper into the repeating groups, I want to set up a quick database with you guys so we can pull information from a database source and I can show you how you can integrate a repeating group with actual data coming from your database. So let's go to the data tab here and I'm gonna create a new database called example. Click here, create, and we are going to have one field that's called title. It will be a text, and we are going to create it. Now I'm going to go to the app data, and here I'm going to add a couple items to my database, okay, in a manual way. I'm going to click here, new entry. The title is going to be title 1, create, then I'm going to create a couple more. Okay, now we have a couple titles here. I created some variations so we can see the difference between them. Now let's go back to our design area. And here now we are going to connect the database with the repeating group. Okay, so I'm going to click on the repeating group. And here instead of text, I'm going to select the data type example, which is the database we just created. And here, instead of this, I'm going to add a do a search for, and the type will be example, which is our database, and I don't have any constraint or anything here. Just want to pull any information from my database for now. For each individual cell to work, I have to specify which type of field or information from my database I actually want to display. So I'm going to click here on the card container group, and now I'm going to say this type of content is also example, and the data source is the current cell example, okay? Because each individual cell here is supposed to get one record from the database at a time. But I need to say, okay, pass this information from the repeating group to the card container group. Otherwise, this group will not contain the information coming from its parent. So now I can click on the text element, and here, instead of adding some static text like I'm doing right now, I can add dynamic data. And the current data is going to come from the parent group, which is going to be this option here, parent groups example. And then we want to get the title, which is under the data fields title. And then we can click away, and this will be good to go. Now our database is connected to our repeating group, and our repeating group is doing a query, which is do a search for and fetch all the results from our database, okay? If we click preview now, let's see how it will load. So as we can see here, now we have the title 1, title example 2, title 3 example, and title example 4. These are all items coming from our database, the database we just created. So it's working. Now we can see we still got the separators here. I'm going to go ahead and remove them. So I'm going to choose here under separators, none. And then if we preview it again, it will look much nicer. By the way, if you also want to learn how to connect Bubble in OpenAI to use ChatGPT inside your Bubble application, make sure to watch this video here on the channel that I created just for you with a full tutorial showing you how you can integrate Bubble and OpenAI. Now, this repeating group is already working and pulling information from my database. And if I want to, like I've mentioned before, I can click here and change some settings. For instance, now I'm showing only 4 rows. If I don't want to set a fixed number of rows, I can uncheck this option. And what's going to happen is that my page will now display all the items available. So right now I have title 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as I keep scrolling, it will show the other items available until there is no item left. Okay, so I can use this option if I want to. It's cutting off a little bit here because my index page size is limited. So if I go to layout and I check here, the page height is only 767. And if I check my repeating group, it's also 400 and it's not with this option selected. So I can select this option and then it will shrink a little bit. And now I can see that it's showing the repeating groups without cutting off. Now, if I want to turn this into another type of repeating group, I can click here. I can come to the appearance tab once again, and then I can say, okay, now I want it to be just one row, but I want it to be 4 columns. For instance, once I click preview, it will change how it looks. Now, of course, this is growing because I have some settings here. Let's see, under layout, I can check fit height to content, and here I can also reduce the mean height to 200 pixels or even define the mean height as 0. Let's preview it once again, and now it will look nicer. Now I'm only showing 4 items and I don't have any option to show extra items. This is all responsive as well. If I reduce the page size, they will adapt. But if I want to show the other items as well, what I can do is to click on the repeating group, go to the appearance tab, and here, instead of having a fixed number of columns, we can uncheck this option. Now we have to look at how this card is configured, okay? Before we do that, let's preview and see how it's looking like so far. So we have title 1, 2, 3, 4, until 7. And it's kind of reduced because if we check here, it has a minimum width of 100 pixels. We can say it's 200, and we can also say stretch columns to fill horizontal space. Let's see if this will change. Okay, so now it's looking a little bit more even. If we say we want to have this as a 400 pixels item, we can preview it. And since now the page doesn't have enough space to actually show all the items coming from the database, it will create a scroll bar. And then we can scroll to visualize the extra items on the list. If we want to have a list with fixed number of items, we can check this option again, and we can define how many columns we will have. Let's say if we have 6, we preview it and it's going to show 6 items. And as we change our page size, at some point they will break because there is not enough space to keep showing all the items side by side. So we can also use some conditionals. If we go back to our editor, we can add a conditional here and define some rules. For instance, we can create a new condition, and we can say when the current page width is smaller than, and we select one of our breakpoints, let's say the mobile landscape breakpoint, then we can create a conditional. So every time the page width is smaller than the actual mobile landscape breakpoint, something will happen. Now we can choose columns to change the number of columns we want to display. So let's select 3. Now, once we preview, nothing will change on this page size, but as we reduce the page, it will change to 3 items. Actually here, I think we would need to change this a little bit earlier. Like here, for instance, we can define a new breakpoint or see if we have another one that is closer like this one. And we can come here to the conditional and change it to tablet and change the columns number to 2. Let's preview it. Now reduce the page, and now it's changed to 2 items. And then we can continue adding other rules and change the styles on the Appearance tab or on the Layout tab to make our repeating groups work specifically as we want. You can add more items and visual elements such as images. You can add video. You can add more buttons, icons, and build the exact layout that you're looking for with repeating groups. Now you know how to use repeating groups, and you can build amazing types of projects using it. I'm very curious to know which types of projects you're gonna build next. And if you end up building a project with Bubble and no-code tools, let us know here in the comment section down below. Now, if you wanna keep learning more about tech and automation, keep watching more amazing tutorials we've created just for you. I catch you on the next one. Let's automate your business.